Here is the full script. There is a company called Palantir that holds behavioral profiles on over 300 million people who never signed a terms of service agreement with them. Not one. They didn't download an app, didn't create an account. They simply lived their lives, searched the web, used a credit card, walked past a camera, and Palantir assembled a working model of who they are, what they want, and how they behave under stress. That is not science fiction from a decade from now. That is the operational reality of August 2026, and Palantir is not even the most aggressive company doing this. The stakes here are not abstract. SanDisk reported last month that revenue from AI data storage infrastructure has surged to record levels, driven almost entirely by demand from AI training and inference systems that need to store behavioral data at scales that were physically impossible 3 years ago. The hardware to hold a profile on every living human being now fits inside a single warehouse. That is one building, one location. The implications split into two directions, and both of them matter. The first is economic. Every piece of behavioral data stored about you is being used to predict your decisions before you make them. Insurance companies in 14 states now use AI-inferred behavioral profiles to set health premiums. If the model flags you as statistically likely to develop a chronic condition based on your grocery purchases, your location patterns, and your sleep schedule inferred from your phone's accelerometer, your rates move before you ever see a doctor. You have no right to audit that model. You cannot correct it. In most cases, you do not even know it exists. The second implication is political. When a sitting U.S. congressperson is quietly flagged by a behavioral AI model as a high-volatility actor months before any public misconduct surfaces, and that information sits inside a government contractor's database, the question of who controls that database becomes a constitutional question. We are not ready to answer it. To understand how we arrived here, you need to go back to 2012. That year, a researcher at Stanford named Michael Kosinski published a paper showing that a simple analysis of Facebook likes could predict a person's personality, political views, sexual orientation, and intelligence with remarkable accuracy. He wasn't hacking anything. He was just reading the behavioral exhaust that people left behind without thinking about it. The paper caused a quiet panic inside social media companies because it demonstrated something nobody had fully confronted. Your data trail is not a record of what you did. It is a map of who you are. In the years following, the volume of data being collected did not grow linearly. It grew like compound interest. By 2018, Facebook alone was collecting 500 terabytes of new data every single day. By 2023, AI systems had begun generating their own inferences on top of that raw data, not just storing what you did, but calculating what your behavior implies about your inner states. The shift from data storage to inference storage is the key transition most people miss entirely. Think of it this way. The old internet kept your receipts. The new one keeps your psychology. Here is what most people still don't understand about the scale of modern AI data collection. It is not primarily happening through apps you use. The dominant mechanism today is called data brokerage with inference enrichment. A company like LiveRamp or Acxiom starts with a basic profile, your name, age, rough location, purchase history. That profile is then sold to an AI enrichment platform, which cross-references it against 17 to 43 separate behavioral data streams. These streams include things like which articles you scroll past without reading, how long your cursor hovers over certain images, and the precise pattern of which days you shop for specific categories of goods. The resulting profile is not a file of facts. It is a dynamic model, a living simulation of your decision-making process. The AI doesn't just know you bought running shoes in March. It knows you buy running shoes when you're experiencing work stress, based on the correlation between your purchase timing and the news topics you consumed in the 48 hours prior. That model is updated in near real time. It is also portable, meaning it can be sold, licensed, or subpoenaed. There are currently no federal regulations in the United States requiring these companies to disclose that such a model exists about you. Now for the part that genuinely overturns how most people think about this. You likely assume that deleting your social media accounts, using a VPN, or switching to a privacy browser meaningfully limits what AI systems know about you. The data strongly suggests otherwise. A 2025 study by researchers at MIT found that a behavioral AI model built entirely from passive infrastructure data, traffic cameras, mobile network ping logs, and anonymized payment terminal records, could reconstruct a person's daily schedule, social relationships, and psychological traits with 87% accuracy, without ever accessing that person's personal accounts. 87%. For reference, The most accurate traditional psychological assessment tools used by clinical professionals typically reach between 70 and 75% accuracy after hours of direct evaluation. The researcher who led the study, Dr. Kathy O'Neill, put it plainly in an interview: "The model doesn't need your phone. The city you live in is already broadcasting enough signal. You are essentially wearing a tracking device you cannot take off, made not of hardware, but of your own behavioral patterns interacting with a world of sensors built for entirely different purposes." The mechanism underneath all of this is called Federated Inference architecture, and it works in a way that is counterintuitive once you understand it. Traditional data collection worked centrally. Your information traveled to a server somewhere and sat there. Federated inference runs in the opposite direction. The AI model travels to the data, processes it locally, extracts the behavioral signal, and sends only that compressed inference back to a central system. The genius and the danger of this approach is that raw personal data technically never leaves your device or local environment. This lets companies argue, with some legal accuracy, that they are not storing your private information. What they are storing is something arguably more powerful: the conclusion the AI drew from your information. Imagine a doctor who promises never to keep your medical records but insists on keeping the diagnosis forever. The record is gone. The judgment about you remains and circulates indefinitely. That diagnosis can be licensed, aggregated with other diagnoses, and used to make decisions about your life by parties you will never interact with. The counterintuitive element is this: the privacy protection is real at the data layer and completely non-existent at the inference layer. Most privacy legislation in the world was written to protect the former, not the latter. The complications are serious, and they are not hypothetical. The first is the problem of error propagation. If an AI draws a wrong inference about you, say, flagging your browsing behavior as consistent with financial instability when you were actually researching a novel, that incorrect inference bakes itself into your behavioral profile and gets amplified every time the model is updated. There is no universal right to correction. In the European Union, GDPR gives you partial access to data held about you, but it does not give you access to AI-generated inferences, which are typically classified as proprietary intellectual property. The second complication is the concentration problem. 3 companies, Google, Microsoft through its OpenAI partnership, and Meta, collectively control the inference infrastructure for an estimated 4.8 billion people. That concentration means systemic errors or deliberate misuse at those 3 nodes would affect the majority of the world's internet users simultaneously, with no competing model to serve as a check. Here is how this lands in your actual life. If you work in healthcare, insurance, financial services, or any field that uses algorithmic hiring, which now includes over 68% of Fortune 500 companies, there is a working behavioral model of you sitting inside a data broker system right now. It has almost certainly shaped decisions made about you in the last 12 months. Your credit limit, your insurance tier, possibly a job you applied for and didn't get. The window to regulate this effectively at the individual level is closing. By 2028, Gartner estimates that AI inference systems will be embedded in over 90% of enterprise HR platforms globally. What you can do concretely right now: in the EU, file a subject access request with any data broker operating under GDPR. In the US, California's CPRA gives you limited but real rights to opt out of data sales. Use them. The mechanism exists. Most people simply don't know it does. Zoom out, and the trajectory becomes clear. Within the next decade, AI behavioral profiles will likely be more comprehensive than anything a human analyst could produce, more accurate than self-reporting, and more persistent than any record you have ever generated intentionally. The SanDisk revenue numbers from last